I'm Hank, and this is my review for the RGBlink Mini. Full disclosure, that RGBlink sent me the Mini for the purpose of this review. However, they don't have any say-so in the review, and they won't see it prior to its release to everyone. If you end up wanting to get the RGBlink Mini, my affiliate link is down in the description. At the time of this recording, the RGBlink Mini costs just $199 US. Inside the box, you get a USB-C to USB-C cable with power adapter, a 3.0 USB-A to USB-A cable, a TRRS male to dual female audio cable, and a getting started guide. Build-wise, the RGBlink Mini is a little lightweight, but everything seems pretty solid. However, there is some wobble in the T-bar, but the buttons, the rotary knobs, all the ports, the nice rubber feet, everything else is pretty solid in my opinion. There's also a tripod-ready screw on this side of the unit. We'll come back around to that. The RGBlink Mini features 4 HDMI inputs, a line input, a mic input with splitter cable. You're able to stream a 6-picture preview or program from any of the 4 high-definition HDMI inputs. You have 14 built-in transitions, 9 picture-in-picture layouts, and even a logo overlay that you can customize, of course. On the unit, we have this cool little layout screen that shows you the preview to each of the 4 HDMI inputs. So if I were on 1, it lines up with 1. If I switch to 2 is the overhead of this. 3 is a video game on the Nintendo Switch. And then 4 is the computer. So in my opinion, it's really beneficial to have this little 2.1-inch screen on the device. So you can just quickly look at that. You don't have to look up at the program going out or the preview window going out. So on here, if we hit the set button, we can come around and we have all the different fades. I'm not going to do all of these things. There's a lot of them. You can choose which one you want by hitting this other rotary knob on the other side and then pushing it in like a button. And then when it turns yellow, you know it has taken. So it's kind of fading into the next image like that. And there's just numerous ones to choose from. But I prefer to just leave it on the cut and just have that one solidly on, as it is just a more simplistic and easier way to do the device. So on here, if we hit this again, now we have the transition mode and time. When it's set to fast, it's just you're going to hit the buttons and they're going to switch. You can also set it to T-bar. So then if I have the T-bar set up, I can hit what I want to come next. So if I want to switch over to camera 1, and then I can just hit the bar, and then I go back, and if I push it back, it goes back to the original look. I'm personally not big into the T-bar. That's just not what I'm trying to do. So I keep it on fast, and I keep it on half second, so it's a quick transition. When we turn the T-bar off, it's just much more fluid to switch to what you want to switch to. One thing that I found very interesting in this unit, and I absolutely love, is the ability to adjust the fan. If I come into the fan, I can get in there and I can adjust it higher, makes it spin up a little louder, and then lower or off would have the unit just trying to dissipate the heat on its own or with very little input. I've kept it around 2 and I can run it for hours and hours and hours without issue. At $199, I think it is really cool that they included that capability, because typically what I've experienced in the past is you have absolutely no control over that aspect of a unit. Next up, I want to talk just a little bit about the software that they include with the unit, which allows you to control the unit from a PC or Mac or a mobile phone, etc. And it's really cool, but I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it as there's just so many different aspects to it, and it controls exactly how the hardware would control the unit. All right, Hank here with the Expose software for the RGBlink Mini. Now, what I did was once I installed the software, and you have to run it as an administrator on Windows 10 anyway. Once I did that, I plugged in an Ethernet cable directly into the Mini, and then it's on the same network from the router as it is the computer I'm on. And then I also turned on the DHCP setting under IP setting, turn that to on, and that way the router gives it its own IP address. All right, and then once it showed up here, what I did was click this squiggly line here, and then I entered the IP address it gave me from the unit under that setting and clicked OK. And then once I get into that, it just shows me that I have two things plugged into 1 and 2. And so down here in connection status, this turns green when it's ready to rock and roll. So now on the computer, I can click 1 or 2, and I'm gonna make a separate recording so you can actually see what's on the screen at this time. But I'll click 1, and then I click 2, and it switches between those cameras for me. And then also you get into the menu. It's just easier of a deep dive when you get into the menu than diving in on the device itself. So you can just get into any of those settings like I showed earlier and manipulate those, as well as the picture-in-picture. So you could do transitions, you can do all of the stuff that you could do before, you can do on this setup. But that's really all there is to this software. It's just a handy tool if you want to use it to menu dive or to control the unit. Let's say you have the unit a little further out of reach, or you have another person controlling the software, then they can do all this work while you just do the show. But most of us don't have that, so using the device buttons is just as easy. Back to the rest of the video. In pros and cons, I'll get to some of the nuances of the unit. But honestly, it was simply just plug and play. I plugged in 4 separate either cameras or HDMI sources, like the video game system and one of my spare computers, and it just automatically came up on the screen. I can output it to a television monitor that I'm looking at right now behind the camera, and it's just as simple as that. All the other stuff, you're going to dig into the menu and dive a bit, and we're going to do that a little bit more here. But I did want to say it is pretty plug and play in my opinion, and it's kind of easy to figure out from a hardware standpoint more so than some of the technical software stuff. But if we get back on the unit and we continue our process of going through stuff, here's where it starts to get really cool. So on here we have picture in picture. And then if I toggle this over, I can dictate, and this is going to be for screen A. And then if I push in this button again, so then you see once I've set that up, toggle the picture in picture out of the way a little bit. But now you can see, if you see on the screen, it's A. Now if I push that in, it's B. So now you can manipulate the front image and the back image. So A is going to be the large screen. That is like the backdrop screen. So even with the backdrop screen, I could move it. As you see, it's moving. But I wouldn't want to do that, obviously. But if there was something I wanted to be able to see around this little picture in picture, and I needed them both on the screen, I could manipulate the horizontal and the vertical of this. So you see, I can move that back image just like that. And I think that's really cool, to be honest with you. If I come back over here and get it to the B, now I go back into menu and I can dictate the horizontal and the vertical of this. But this is really handy to be able to do this on the fly live. So then you can see we can just stay in here and we can manipulate each thing. I think that is really good, especially if I were going to be gaming. I would obviously want the little B menu to be me, and then I would want the A menu to be the game. And then so I could sit here and I could game, and I could have a nice stream put together on there. And you can even go deeper on here where you get into this menu, and we want to go to the B screen. And then when we hit the menu on here, and I can come down, and I could come down to the sizes, and I could manipulate that. And you see how I'm getting bigger on the little overlay, and then I could get smaller on the little overlay. I think this is really handy because a lot of games that I play anyway, they'll have information in different spots. I'm going to turn picture in picture back off. At $199, what an excellent feature to be able to get in there. Another thing I love about this unit is I can go into the input and I can check the stats on what it's accepting. And you could even turn deinterlace on or off. But under HDMI, we can have the output be program or the preview. So we could do a little inception look. But we'll put it back to program. And then HDMI, the output can be HDMI or DVI, which I used to use. I haven't used in a long time. You can set the format to whatever you want it to. I'm not going to do it right this second because it's already in action. Under USB 3.0, you can enter that and determine if you want program or if you want preview window to go out to the computer. I would always keep it on program because I would be using the 3.0 stream for going to OBS or StreamYard or what have you. And then you can set the functionality too. Any inactivity for a few seconds, it does go back, so we'll talk about that a little more later. But under audio, this is what I really want to dial in on, is if you go to the HDMI ports, you can turn those off. So the two cameras, I would obviously keep those off. You can have the sound on, off, and then you can dictate the volume. So you could turn the HDMI for that particular unit up. And then you just hit this menu button to back up. But we could go to 1 and 2 are my cameras, but 3 and 4 are computer and video game. So I have the music off currently on that, but if you were live stream gaming, you'd want to have the music on. Another fascinating feature on here is the color settings for the HDMI inputs. So you can go to, let's back out a little bit, and let's select camera 2, which is this overhead. Let's enable that. So we've enabled that. And now you see if I go to brightness, I can make it brighter. And it's just once you click it in, that's when it takes effect. So you could go through and you could change your red, your green, your saturation, your blue, and you could just reset it to get back to what you want. But I thought that was a really cool feature. And of course, you could change language. That's a pretty good menu dive if you really stop and think about for $199. All the different features and functionality you have right on board. You don't have to go to the computer to do this stuff. You don't have to download some secondary app if you don't really want to. You can just set this up, and then out of the USB 3.0, you're sending that signal out to the computer. Computer views the entirety of the unit as a webcam. I do want to get into the pros and the cons of this unit. First pro is obviously the price, $199 for HDMI input switcher. You've got to be somewhat impressed at that price point what they're able to provide you. Another pro is the 2.1 inch screen. Having the screen on here and knowing that this top left aligns with 1 and the bottom left aligns with 3 and so on and so forth, it's just a quick little reminder. Another pro is the 14 different transitions. While I'm not going to be diving deep into some of these because I don't really want to use some of them, it's nice that they did include them. So you gotta say that's a huge pro. Another pro is obviously the picture-in-picture and being able to manipulate the settings on the fly. That is outstanding. As I mentioned earlier, having the ability to adjust the fan, so if you want less noise or if you want it to be cool with more noise, being able to dictate what the setting of the fan is, that is excellent. Another pro, I was not expecting the HDMI color adjustments. I didn't expect that at all. That's pretty cool too. Now, should we be getting it right in our initial settings, etc.? Yes, but as you can see by this video, I could just fine tune some things a little bit if I felt like it. Another pro is, while I didn't dive deep into it because I really don't have a need to have this baked in like this, being able to put your custom logo up there like that if you wanted to, I think that's very cool. And some people might want to bake in their stuff. I personally don't want to cover parts of the screen just in case I needed to show you something on the computer and that just happens to be covering up the lower right hand spot. And also on that, you can adjust the X and Y, so you can fine tune that as well, which is cool as heck. Another pro is the ability to menu dive. You've seen just in this video, there's a ton of features in here, a ton of adjustments you can make on this unit. You've got to be impressed with that level of customization, especially at $199. And lastly, the software for the computer and for mobile, those are both beneficial if that's your use case. Not really something I'm deep into, but it's there if you need it. When it comes to cons, I've got a couple of them, and mostly center around the accessories. This is just far too short. I don't have a laptop. I don't have a computer. I'm sitting on the desk. So this cable is useless for me. So I had to get one of my own 3.0 cables to make it work. Plus it is USB-A to A. And a lot of modern computers are USB-C, so you might run into an issue there. And the power cable, same thing. Just too short to be good and functional. I had to run an extension cord up towards the desk because the cable is just really super short. There's a piece of software I was trying to get. I think it was for drivers or firmware or something like that. But in order to get that thing, it took me 2 days to figure this out. But I had to run it as the administrator. So just be careful with that. I can help shortcut you the agony of trying to figure that out. I had to run that particular download as the admin, and then it installed in seconds. And I wish I would have just known that, but I didn't, unfortunately. When it comes to just giving you some notes, these are not criticisms. These are just notes that you have to keep in mind. First things first, this is not an ISO recorder. I see people online thinking that this is one of the other versions of the unit, and this is not. This is just a base. You know, you're going to get the program out or the preview window out, one or the other. So this is not ISO. It's not recording all these channels separately. And what I alluded to earlier is that tripod-ready screw mount is on the side of the unit. I just find that to be a little odd. If you want the unit to lay horizontally, you're going to have to use some sort of L bracket because otherwise it'd be sticking up and down like this. And I just don't know why it's on the side other than maybe something to do with manufacturing. I didn't ask them about it, but just kind of odd to me. And another big note is if you do have to get some sort of power other than what's included, because you lost it, broke it, something, or the cable's so short it's unusable or something like that, you have to meet the following requirements. It must meet USB power delivery PD 3.0 specs, must have fast charge capability, has to be rated for a minimum of 20 watts, and then certified power delivery aware USB cable. So that is something that I've seen a lot of different devices over the last couple of years be really particular on how much power they need to run. The last note I want to bring up is I even emailed them about this. I was like, is there some format to shutting this thing down? There's no power button. So what do you do? They're like, yep, just unplug it. And I was like, oh my gosh, it reminded me of this funny story when I took a nephew to a restaurant called Logan's back in early 2000s, I want to say. Back then, you would take they would give you buckets of peanuts, and you would take the shells and you would just throw them on the floor. It just seemed wrong. And so when there's no power button on this video switcher, I was just like, oh, this seems so wrong as I was pulling it out of the wall socket to power it down. It just seems off, but that's the way it goes. I use it separately. I use an audio interface and then the video switcher as the video switcher. Can you put a mic into it? Of course you can. I think you get better results if you have an audio interface that you're plugging your mic into, and then you are plugging the output into this unit. I just think it works out so much better. That's just my opinion. Overall, I had a ton of fun with the RGBlink Mini. As you've seen here, it's really easy to use, and I had a blast with it. So thanks again to RGBlink for sending this over. And again, if you want to check it out, my link is in the description. As always, thank you.